What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today I wanted to revisit Alec Mitrevsky. This is a guy I did a video on a while back on his transformation using SARMs, which I thought was pretty impressive. And most people didn't believe it. And the guy's now full-blown on gear. So I wanted to readdress, check his progress over the past year and kind of check back and see what kind of difference it's made since he jumped from oral SARMs over to the heavy duty gear. Okay, so going back to way back at the beginning of this guy's progress here, we go back to his natty days, which, as you can see, he always had a pretty decent foundation, even way back when he was natty. Obviously, very good genetic inserts in certain body parts for being, well, like obviously some people are going to say, oh, you know, like you're a pinner here. But honestly, most guys' backs when they just started working out are not going to look like this in the first literal year they started working out. So I'm just going back to the very beginning here. So this guy's always, you know, had a good foundation, I would say. Like anybody who has a shredded six pack as a natty who hasn't even started working out yet, I'd say is pretty, you know, has a good potential ahead of them. Here, still natty as far as I know. When he started to get into the performance enhancement realm around this time, I'm skipping some of the old stuff. So you can see it's starting to take some shape here. It looks pretty damn good for being like 1 year in here. I'm pretty sure, as outlined in the first video, he actually did do a mild steroid cycle to begin with before even touching SARMs. And the thing that spurred him to jump to SARMs only shortly thereafter was hair loss concerns. So after doing a short stint with exogenous androgens, he switched to SARMs only, and then he continued to build on his physique, which surprisingly, he was able to build a very impressive physique for SARMs only. A lot of people would think there's no way to build the physique he did on SARMs only, but he did, you know, within a few years, he built what most people wouldn't even get on Tren. So going above here, getting a bit higher, obviously he has good leg genetics. He has good quads. He has good abs. I know he was in the SARMs realm here. At this point, he first started with Osterine and S4 concurrently. And then shortly thereafter, he started to realize that the HPTA suppression is actually a real concern with SARMs, despite what all of the overhyped, you know, ignorant people will tell you online, on their blogs and whatnot. There's a very real concern with endogenous androgen suppression. So what happens as a result of that, eventually your aromatization goes into the toilet and you don't have a sufficient amount of estradiol conversion. So the problem in that lies that if you don't have a sufficient amount of estradiol, not only are you going to have dry, achy joints, terrible libido, erectile dysfunction, feel like crap in general, but you could experience a myriad of more deleterious outcomes like literal bone mineral density degradation, a bunch of other very negative side effects that come with a lack of sufficient estrogen. So if somebody was to implement SARMs as a form of, you know, like makeshift hormone replacement therapy in a hair loss prevention capacity while maintaining enough anabolic activity to maintain a build and maintain a high quality physique, you would need to figure out a way to get E2 levels up. And the way he decided to do that with exogenous estrofem, which is just micronized estradiol tablets that he popped to bring his E2 levels up to physiological levels so he can maintain all the things I just mentioned. So as you can see here, like nothing to scoff at for SARMs only, especially. It's very impressive. This guy has a better physique than most guys I know on gear. Speaks partially for his genetics, but also his work ethic. I know he was doing just absurdly dedicating himself to this process and really strong development considering, as you see here, just nutty striations. I've covered these actually in the first video because the extent to which I elaborated on his progress was basically when he was still doing SARMs only with exogenous estradiol. And I actually filmed that video a couple of years ago, I believe now, despite having published it relatively recently. So obviously, you know, a very decent physique considering what most people would assume is unachievable with SARMs. They think SARMs don't do anything, but This is the most indicative transformation I know of. That is somebody who used SARMs long term, not just for a short stint, but actually built up their foundation on just SARMs. Like, he had no endogenous androgen support because he had effectively shut down his own testosterone and DHT with the long-term use of the SARMs, as well as the exogenous estradiol. Like, there was no amount of testosterone or DHT contributing to this physique that you see here. So as far as obviously built a very strong foundation that most people would never even achieve on gear. Moving towards the progress he made once he implemented gear. Here he's still on SARMs only. He did implement GH in cycles at many times throughout his progression as well, which should be noted. However, I think the effect GH actually has on lean muscle accrual is grossly over exaggerated, and I believe the majority of the gains anybody makes, whether it be a bodybuilder, whether it be a whatever, I feel like are largely going to be attributed to exogenous anabolics as opposed to growth hormone. I believe growth hormone and secretagogues and peptides do have a very profound effect on a cosmetic look and the appearance of somebody's body composition, but as far as actual long-term muscle accrual, I think that is largely mediated via exogenous anabolics and is what can largely be attributed to his progression that you see here. So he has a lot of pictures with the SARMs only here. I'm just going to skip up a bit more. There's a chest shot going up a bit higher. Here was, I believe, his last little bit on SARMs only. As you can see, this was when he was still on, I believe it was a high dose of S4, where he's essentially walking around in blind 24/7, not actually blind, but with a severe, night vision issues, adjusting from light to dark, and with that yellow-green tint it's known for, which obviously is worrisome. But with that being said, extremely impressive results for SARMs only. And as we get a bit deeper into his Instagram here, you can start to see he's still on SARMs only here, I believe. Actually, I'm 100% certain he was on SARMs here, getting into, I think this is where his physique peaked before he got into the gear. So here, obviously, very impressive back detail and thickness. Obviously, a genetic strong point for him. These were some of the most impressive shots I've seen of a guy on SARMs only ever, to be honest. And these shots literally look to me like somebody who's been, cranking for years, not somebody who's on SARMs only, and especially only for a couple of years. Like, he hasn't been at this very long. He's a young guy. I believe he's only 22 right now. And at the time of these videos, he was either 20 or 21 with only, a handful of years under his belt. So obviously has no problem getting conditioned either. Has very impressive muscle detail. Got that 3D look almost even on the SARMs only, which was interesting and notable. See here, this is a very crazy back shot for S4. I remember when I saw this and I was thinking, okay, there's no fucking way this guy's still on SARMs only. But he was. And moving forward, like, this guy has no reason to lie. A lot of people are going to say there's no fucking way he looked like this on SARMs only, which is fine. And I believe this was about where his physique had peaked on SARMs only. Like I mentioned, there was a bit more that I guess I hadn't covered that was a bit higher up on the Instagram here. But this was about where his physique peaked and where he decided to take things up a notch and start to introduce exogenous anabolic androgenic steroids. So here, still SARMs only here. And then about the end of 2018, this is actually March 6th. At the end of 2018, he started to implement exogenous androgens, and here you can start to see, well, first of all, starting to get a bit puffy because the guy's in full bulk mode, and starting to get a bit more full. Showing a back shot. Let's get up into, he actually didn't take that many progress pics. All of a sudden he just showed up and he was just blown up one day. So here he's mid bulk and getting a bit too closer to the more recent progress. Here you can see just a whole new level of size he's starting to take on. Very inflated looking almost. He's in the middle of a bulk, obviously, so he's going to look a bit puffier. And as far as what he was using, the majority of 2019 he was on nandrolone and would cycle on and off of anadrol. And obviously delts, they've always been a genetic strong point for him, but he's starting to get more fullness in the arms, which previously was a lagging body part for him. And this is kind of where things started to really make a huge difference in terms of, as you can see here, it's just like a whole an entirely new level to his physique as opposed to the previous picture. So obviously he's not as lean as he was in the other pictures because he hasn't done a cut since then. So as you can see here, starting to put on a lot more mass and thickness in areas where he was previously deficient. Like the back, his back has always been a strong point, but in the upper body in particular, the arms is starting to take more shape. It's not just overpowering delts anymore. Here, one of the most impressive pictures yet to date of his physique, still maintaining visible abs despite bulking for almost a year straight at this point. And this is where things kind of, went to the next level. So as you can see here, I believe in terms of body weight, his body weight's up about like 30 or 40 pounds. Now, how much of that is actual lean muscle mass? That is to be determined after his next cut, but obviously he's not fat by any means here. He's still very lean, and everything seems to be going to the right places. Like you see his arms, it's completely different than what his arms used to look like, and just taking on, this is a progress pic here from 2014 to 2015 to 2017. 2017, he was on SARMs only, like I mentioned. He did make some fair progress, I think, even on the SARMs only. Like his physique was nothing to scoff at whatsoever. He had a good amount of size on him. A lot more than people would think is possible with SARMs only, but it's almost like a men's physique, or something that would be, compared to somebody from men's physique, maybe not an IFBB level, but still, top 0.00 whatever percent physique that most people wouldn't even get on gear. But jumping on the actual sauce, it's just a whole nother level. And this is just an example of, I wouldn't say hyper response to anabolics, but a very good response with a guy with pretty good genetics in terms of muscle growth. So this is after about 9 months of pure bulking and just, being in a surplus, with nandrolone and anadrol being cycled in and out. And just interesting to see because there are not very many cases online or, anywhere that we can reference that you can actually see in real time the difference between maxing out your physique on SARMs and maxing out, well, not maxing out, but taking the switch after plateauing on SARMs and jumping up to super physiological amounts of anabolic androgenic hormones. Because most people, what they do is they start with gear and then they go down to SARMs after they try to avoid hair loss and androgenic side effects. Or you have guys who are introduced to the world of enhancement and they try to start with SARMs because they don't want to pin or they're afraid of the potential side effects, and somebody's hyped them up as something that they, think it's as good as gear without the side effects or whatever. It's just, regardless of the scenario, it's extremely rare that you have an individual that you can see go from natty to SARMs only for over like years on SARMs only, not just, like a short cycle. Like this guy literally put his body in an environment where there was no endogenous androgens and just had SARMs supporting muscle tissue. So seeing what they can actually do in the absence of conflicting factors, you can see exactly what a sufficient amount of estradiol, which is a component that is often completely neglected in the realm of SARMs. No one really understands hormone management in an estrogen context. The literal what can be expected, I wouldn't say necessarily what can be expected, but just an example of what somebody has done with SARMs only in their system with no conflicting androgens, screwing up the, potential results that we're seeing, and then going from that and then going straight to super physiological amounts of exogenous androgens with no conflicting factors going into that as well. So enlightening to say the least, and really interesting to see that progress in real time. If you guys want to check him out, his Instagram is at matrevsky.alec, and I'll put the link in the description below his Instagram. Go give him a follow, continue following his progress, and see what happens over the years. Maybe he'll go back to SARMs only. That remains to be seen. Maybe he'll compete. You never know. It sounds like he's not really sure what he wants to do right now. I've talked to him about it recently in terms of what his goals are, because he is, health and longevity focused, and you can only gain so much size before you start to realize the potential ramifications of your actions. So it remains to be seen what he's going to decide to do, but nonetheless, I feel it is a very, very interesting subject to bring to light, because no one that I'm aware of has as good of a reference point as this guy has given us for what realistically can be done when life is dedicated to bodybuilding, essentially, with your body entirely relying on SARMs for years and then entirely relying on super physiological amounts of exogenous androgens afterwards. And that's all with a sufficient amount of estradiol maintained throughout the process, because that's something that's completely overlooked in a lot of scenarios as well, where, SARMs will be inherently limited in their anabolic effects due to the lack of aromatization and the lack of sufficient estradiol, or the poor balance ratio of bioavailable androgens to estrogen in the body. And then the results that you would see are not indicative of what they're actually capable of. So anyways, with all that being said, this video is getting a bit long. Hope you guys enjoy that, found that interesting. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Go follow Alec. His Instagram, like I mentioned, it's in the video description below. Check out the newsletter, link in the description below as well. Anytime I publish an article that goes along with the video, it's far more elaborate than the video with way more detail, and it's organized with concise subsections and a table of contents, and all the clinical studies and trials I reference are always linked in there, as well as any products I mention. So definitely sign up to the newsletter if you want to be notified when the articles go live, as you will learn a lot more from the articles than you do from the videos, where I just talk off the cuff and end up rambling for 20 plus minutes, like in this video, which I will probably have to chop down afterwards in editing. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.